Before we begin, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe and like the video. It really helps us share real history and bring important stories like this to more people. Childhood in the camps. Childhood is usually measured in small things. In the height of a doorframe marked with pencil lines. In the sound of laughter echoing down a street. In scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the belief that tomorrow will be kind. For children who grew up in camps, childhood was measured differently. It was measured in hunger, in silence, in the careful counting of breaths during the night. It was measured in how long one could stand without falling, in how quickly one learned not to cry, and in how much hope could survive inside a body that was still learning how to grow. For many of these children, the world ended not with a loud explosion, but with a knock on the door. They remembered that moment clearly, even decades later. The knock was sharp, impatient, and final. Parents froze. Adults exchanged looks that children did not yet understand. A few hurried words were spoken, instructions whispered. Stay close. Do not speak. Whatever happens, hold my hand. Childhood, which had felt endless just hours earlier, suddenly became very small. The journey to the camps blurred together in memory. There were crowded trains where air was scarce and time lost its meaning. There were long marches where legs burned and feet bled. Children learned quickly that asking questions was dangerous. They learned to listen instead, to observe, to copy the expressions of adults. Fear became a language they understood fluently. When the gates of the camp finally appeared, they did not look like the end of the world. That was the cruelest part. The fences stood quietly. The buildings looked ordinary from a distance. Some children even thought for a moment that this might be a place to rest. That illusion never lasted long. The first lesson children learned in the camps was that names no longer mattered. Numbers replaced them. A child who had once been called by a loving nickname now answered to a sequence of digits shouted across a yard. Saying one's name quietly at night became an act of rebellion, a way to remember who they were before the camps tried to erase them. Hunger arrived immediately and never left. It was not the sharp hunger of a missed meal, but a constant presence, dull and consuming. It lived in the stomach, in the head, in the bones. Children dreamed of bread the way other children dreamed of toys. They imagined the weight of an apple in their hand, the sound it would make when bitten. Some licked empty bowls, hoping taste might return if they believed hard enough. Food was more than nourishment. It was currency, obsession, and comfort. Older children learned to hide scraps, to trade, to protect what little they had. Younger ones often lacked that knowledge. They shared instinctively, even when sharing meant losing strength. Many paid for that kindness with their lives. Work in the camps did not spare children. If they were strong enough to stand, they were strong enough to work. Tasks were often meaningless, repetitive, designed to exhaust rather than to produce. Carrying stones from one pile to another, digging holes only to fill them again. Children learned that exhaustion was safer than attention. Moving too slowly brought punishment. Moving too quickly could bring suspicion. Punishment was unpredictable, and that unpredictability shaped childhood profoundly. A child could be beaten for speaking, for not speaking, for looking in the wrong direction, or for nothing at all. Fear became a constant companion, walking beside them from morning until night. Some children stopped reacting altogether. They learned to make their faces empty, their eyes dull. Survival depended on becoming invisible. And yet, even in that place, childhood did not disappear entirely. It changed form. Children still played, though their games were quiet and dangerous. They invented games that required no movement, no sound, counting cracks in the ground, imagining stories inside their heads, drawing shapes in the dirt with a finger, then erasing them quickly. A shared glance could become a joke. A whispered word could become a treasure. Friendship in the camps formed quickly and intensely. Children clung to one another with a desperation that adults sometimes could not afford. Losing a friend was common, expected, and devastating every time. One morning, a child would not wake up. Another would be taken away during roll call. There was rarely time to grieve. Grief, like everything else, had to be swallowed. Parents who arrived in the camps with their children faced impossible choices. How much truth could a child survive? Some parents tried to shield their children with lies, with stories of temporary hardship and eventual return. Others believed honesty was the only form of preparation they could offer. No approach was safe. Children sensed the truth regardless. They learned to read fear in the tightness of a hand, in the way a voice hesitated before speaking. For children separated from their parents, the camps were even harsher. Without a familiar face, survival depended on strangers, on chance, on quickly learning the unspoken rules. Some older prisoners adopted younger children, sharing food, offering protection when possible. These bonds saved lives, but they also broke hearts when death intervened. Disease spread easily among bodies already weakened by hunger and cold. Children watched their own bodies change in frightening ways. Hair thinned, skin bruised easily, bones seemed sharper under the skin. Illness was terrifying not only because of pain, but because being sick made one visible, and visibility was dangerous. Winter was the enemy children feared most. Cold crept into everything. Shoes that did not fit, clothes that did not protect, fingers that went numb until they could no longer move. At night, children pressed against one another for warmth, sharing breath and body heat. Some mornings, a child did not wake up, their small body finally surrendering to the cold. Death was everywhere, but children experienced it differently than adults. They accepted it more quickly, not because it hurt less, but because there was no alternative. Death became part of the environment, like the fences or the guards. Some children spoke to the dead in their thoughts, promising to remember them. Others avoided thinking about death at all, focusing only on the next hour, the next step. Memory functioned strangely in the camps. Some children remembered their past in vivid detail, replaying scenes of home until the memories felt more real than the present. Others found their memories fading, as if their minds were protecting them from longing. Both experiences were painful. To remember too much was torture. To remember too little felt like betrayal. Education did not exist officially, but learning continued in secret. Older children taught younger ones how to read using scraps of paper, sticks in the dirt, whispered lessons at night. Knowledge became a form of resistance. Remembering a poem, a song, or a mathematical problem reminded children that their minds still belonged to them. Language itself changed in the camps. Words became shorter, sharper. Gestures replaced sentences. Silence carried meaning. Children learned multiple ways to say danger without speaking. They learned how to ask for help with their eyes. Some children survived by clinging to routines, counting steps, repeating prayers or rhymes, telling themselves that if they could survive one more day, then one more, then perhaps someday the fences would open. Hope was fragile, but it existed. It had to. Others survived by detaching emotionally. They stopped expecting kindness. They stopped imagining the future. This numbness protected them, but it also followed them long after the camps were gone. Many survivors later said that learning how to feel again was harder than surviving the camps themselves. Liberation, when it came, was confusing rather than joyful for many children. The sudden absence of guards, the opening of gates, the arrival of unfamiliar faces offering food and help, it all felt unreal. Some children were afraid to eat too much, afraid punishment would follow. Others hoarded food even when told there was enough. Freedom did not immediately restore childhood. Many children no longer knew how to play. Loud noises caused panic. Authority figures inspired fear. Trust had to be relearned slowly, painfully. Some children searched desperately for surviving family members. Others already knew there was no one left to find. The world beyond the camps often struggled to understand these children. They looked small for their age, older in their eyes, quieter in their movements. Adults expected gratitude, relief, normality. What they received instead was silence, nightmares, sudden anger, and deep exhaustion. School was overwhelming. Classrooms felt crowded. Rules felt arbitrary. Other children talked about games, holidays, and family problems that seemed unreal, almost offensive. Survivors learned quickly that their experiences made others uncomfortable. Many stopped talking about the camps altogether. Yet even silence was a form of survival. As years passed, childhood in the camps became a memory that shaped everything that followed. Survivors described feeling permanently divided, the child who had lived behind fences and the adult who lived in freedom. Both existed simultaneously. The child remained cautious and alert, always counting exits, always prepared for loss. Some survivors eventually spoke. They told their stories not because it was easy, but because silence felt like another form of erasure. They spoke for the children who did not survive, for the voices that had been silenced too early. They spoke to remind the world that children had been there, that innocence had been targeted, that childhood itself had been attacked. Childhood in the camps was not a single experience, but thousands of individual stories, each shaped by chance, resilience, and loss. Some children survived because someone shared bread, others because they learned when to look away, others because they refused quietly to forget who they were. What unites these stories is not only suffering, but endurance. The ability of children to adapt, to imagine, to hope even in the darkest conditions reveals both the cruelty of what was done to them and the strength that allowed some to live. Today, when survivors speak of their childhood, they rarely describe it as stolen. They say it was transformed. It became something heavy they carried with them, something that shaped their sense of justice, empathy, and responsibility. Many dedicated their lives to protecting others, to teaching, to remembering. Because forgetting is dangerous. Childhood in the camps teaches us that the destruction of innocence is not an abstract concept. It happens in small moments. A child learning not to cry, a child learning to hide hunger, a child learning that silence can save a life. These lessons do not disappear when the fences fall. They remain, passed down through stories, through memory, through warning. And as long as those stories are told, the children who lived through the camps are not only victims of history, they are witnesses.